The crystalline dome of Nexus Station gleamed under the light of 3 distant suns, its translucent panels filtering the harsh cosmic radiation into a pleasant amber glow that bathed the central plaza. Beneath this artificial sky, thousands of beings from across the Galactic Council's territories mingled in what was often described as the greatest melting pot of civilizations in the known universe. Crix-9 adjusted his optical sensors, all 3 of his cerebral lobes working in perfect harmony as he recorded yet another day of what he privately referred to as the human comedy. As a Vaxian observer, his role was simple: document the behaviors and interactions of the Council's newest provisional members, humans, and report back to the High Archives. It was, in his professional opinion, the easiest assignment in his 67 cycles of service. Pink, squishy creatures, he muttered to himself, the words automatically transcribed by his neural recorder. Still pretending they belong among the star-faring races. From his vantage point near a bioluminescent crystal vendor, Crix-9 had a perfect view of the 4 humans who had caught his attention. They sat at one of the plaza's nutrition stations, consuming protein paste with those peculiar appendages they called fingers. The oldest female, Dr. Patel, according to his identification scan, appeared to be in her 8th decade, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, her brown skin wrinkled with age. Beside her sat a younger female, introduced as her granddaughter Maya Singh, approximately 20 solar cycles old with similar coloration but vibrant, alert eyes that seemed to constantly survey the surroundings. The other 2 humans were identified as Tom, a broad-shouldered male with a perpetual half-smile, and Elena Vasquez, a stern-faced female whose posture suggested military training despite her civilian attire. They spoke quietly among themselves, occasionally laughing at some shared joke that Crix-9 couldn't decipher even with his advanced translation algorithms. Fascinating how they maintain the illusion of relevance. Crix-9 dictated, his middle brain lobe pulsing with amusement. Note their consumption of basic nutrition as if they were engaging in some sophisticated cultural ritual rather than mere sustenance intake. The central plaza buzzed with activity around them. A group of Meridian floating merchants hovered near the grand biokinetic fountain, their translucent bodies reflecting the shifting colors of the water. Several Quill diplomats shuffled past in their ceremonial robes, their feather-like appendages rustling with each careful step. Even a pair of rarely seen Vortian mystics stood in silent communion near the central memorial, their crystalline exoskeletons capturing and refracting the ambient light. Among this diverse tapestry of galactic society, the humans looked painfully ordinary, painfully forgettable, until they weren't. Crix-9's attention was suddenly drawn to a commotion near the humans' table. A massive figure was pushing through the crowd, his heavy footfalls causing ripples in the fountain's water despite being several meters away. Sergeant Vorth, the Gordon peace officer assigned to this sector of Nexus Station, was making his way directly toward the human group, 6 of his subordinates trailing behind him at a respectful distance. Crix-9 immediately activated his high-definition recording protocols. Interactions between Gordons and humans were always worth documenting, particularly when the Gordon in question was Sergeant Vorth, known for his barely concealed disdain for the Council's newest members. Vorth towered over the seated humans, his 3-meter frame bulging with enhanced musculature beneath the standard-issue enforcement armor. His gray-green skin was marred by ritual scarification that told the story of his many victories in combat. And the neural implants protruding from his skull pulsed with a dull red glow. When he spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Humans," he said, the word itself sounding like an insult in his native accent. "How generous of you to grace us with your presence in our civilized spaces. Dr. Patel looked up from her meal, her expression placid. "Good afternoon, Sergeant. Is there something we can help you with?" Vorth's upper lip curled, revealing rows of serrated teeth. "Help? From humans? That would be a first in galactic history." He leaned down, his massive head now level with theirs. "I simply came to observe the newest members of our council pretending to be civilized. It's quite the performance." Tom shifted slightly, his hand moving beneath the table. But Dr. Patel placed a gentle hand on his arm. The gesture was subtle, but Crix-9 noted it with interest. The older human was clearly the alpha of their small group, despite her advanced age and fragile appearance. "We're just enjoying a meal, Sergeant," Dr. Patel said, her voice steady. "As is our right under council law." "Rights," Vorth spat the word. "Given to you by the bleeding hearts of the council before you proved yourselves worthy. Tell me, human, what has your species contributed to galactic society besides violence and primitive technology?" Maya Singh, who had remained silent until now, placed her nutrition implement down with deliberate slowness. "If you're bored, Sergeant, I hear the training facilities on Level 7 are excellent. Perhaps you could work off some of that excess energy there instead of interrupting our lunch." The ambient noise of the plaza diminished as if someone had adjusted a volume control. Nearby conversations halted mid-sentence. The floating merchants drifted slightly away. Even the continuous splash of the fountain seemed to grow quieter. Crix-9 felt his three brains synchronize in sudden attention. This was unexpected. Humans typically avoided confrontation with Gordons, especially Gordons in positions of authority. Their fragile bodies and lack of natural defenses made such encounters potentially terminal. Vorth stared at the young human female, his neural implants flashing from dull red to bright crimson. "Did you just suggest that I, a Gordon elite guard, should engage with a human in combat training?" Maya smiled, the expression never reaching her eyes. "Not at all, Sergeant. I was merely suggesting an outlet for what appears to be considerable frustration on your part." Crix-9 moved closer, adjusting his position for optimal recording. This interaction had just become significantly more interesting than he had anticipated. Vorth's massive hand moved faster than seemed possible for a being of his size. The sound of the slap echoed across the now silent plaza, a sharp crack that made several nearby Quill diplomats flinch and retract their sensitive feather appendages. Maya's head snapped to the side from the force of the blow, a red mark blooming instantly across her cheek. Dr. Patel remained impossibly still, as did Tom and Elena. None of them moved to help the young woman. None of them protested. They simply watched. And then Maya turned her face back toward Vorth, a thin trickle of blood running from the corner of her mouth. She smiled. It wasn't the reaction Crix-9 had expected. It wasn't the reaction Vorth had expected either, judging by the momentary confusion that crossed his scarified features. Humans were known to be emotional, quick to display fear or anger. This calm, almost predatory smile was disconcerting. "Physical assault on a council citizen," Maya said quietly, dabbing at the blood with a napkin. "That's quite serious, isn't it, Captain Vasquez?" Elena Vasquez nodded slightly. "Section 47 of the Unified Code, to be precise." Vorth's confusion gave way to renewed anger. He reached for the force pike strapped to his back, the weapon humming to life with a menacing crackle of energy. "You dare to quote council law to me? I am the law in this sector." The four humans remained seated, seemingly unconcerned by the activated weapon now pointed in their direction. The nearby plaza occupants, however, began to move away more urgently, creating a widening circle around the confrontation. Crix-9 recorded everything, his processors working overtime to analyze the unusual behavior of the humans. By all known psychological profiles, they should be displaying fear, attempting to de-escalate or flee. Instead, they appeared expectant. Dr. Patel finally stood, her movements unhurried and precise despite her advanced age. "Sergeant Vorth, I believe we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. Perhaps we should discuss this matter civilly." Vorth laughed, a guttural sound that reverberated through his massive chest. "The human elder wishes to talk. How typical of your weak species, always hiding behind words when faced with superior strength." "Not hiding," Dr. Patel said, stepping around the table to stand directly before the towering Gordon. "Offering you a chance to reconsider your actions." Crix 9 zoomed in on the elderly human, his interest thoroughly piqued. What was she doing? At her age and size, she wouldn't survive a single blow from the Gordon officer. "Grandmother," Maya said, her voice carrying a warning tone that Crix 9 couldn't quite interpret. Dr. Patel waved a dismissive hand. "It's all right, dear. Sergeant Vorth and I are just having a conversation." The Gordon lowered his force pike until the crackling energy field at its tip was mere centimeters from Dr. Patel's chest. "Your final conversation, perhaps. Your species' arrogance is matched only by your frailty." "Interesting perspective," Dr. Patel said, looking up at the massive alien with what appeared to be genuine curiosity. "Tell me, Sergeant, in your extensive combat training, did you ever study the concept of pressure points?" Vorth snorted. "Another human fantasy. All species have different physiologies. There are no universal vulnerabilities." "A common misconception," Dr. Patel said, her tone taking on a didactic quality, as if she were giving a lecture rather than facing down an armed opponent 3 times her size. "While specific anatomies differ, the principle remains consistent across all carbon-based life forms with central nervous systems. Pressure is simply the application of force to a specific area to achieve a disproportionate result." As she spoke, her right hand moved with startling speed, fingers extended in a rigid formation that connected with a point just beneath Vorth's left arm joint, where the armor showed a small gap. The effect was instantaneous and astonishing. Vorth's massive body suddenly went rigid, the force pike clattering to the floor as his grip failed. A strangled sound escaped his throat as he dropped to one knee, his right arm hanging uselessly at his side. "Fascinating, isn't it?" Dr. Patel continued, circling the kneeling Gordon with the calm demeanor of a physician examining a patient. "That particular cluster of nerve endings connects directly to your secondary motor cortex. The temporary paralysis should wear off in about 20 minutes, though the pins and needles sensation might linger for an hour or so." Crix 9 felt his 3 brains struggling to process what he was witnessing. This couldn't be happening. A human, an elderly human female, had just incapacitated a Gordon elite guard with a single touch. It defied everything he thought he knew about both species. "What? What have you done to me?" Vorth gasped, his neural implants now flashing erratically. "I've merely demonstrated a practical application of xenobiological knowledge," Dr. Patel replied. "No permanent damage. I assure you now, about that apology to my granddaughter." The other Gordon officers had moved forward during the confrontation, but now stood frozen in uncertainty, their weapons half drawn as they watched their commander kneeling before the small human elder. Maya rose from her seat and approached, stopping beside her grandmother. The red mark on her face was darkening into what would clearly become a significant bruise, but her expression remained unnervingly calm. "I believe Sergeant Vorth was about to apologize," she said, her voice carrying across the now completely silent plaza. Vorth looked up at her, rage and confusion warring in his features. "I apologize," he forced out, the words clearly causing him physical pain. Maya tilted her head slightly, studying him as one might study an insect pinned to a display board. For striking you, Vorth growled. And insulting your species. The tension in the air was palpable, a stretched wire about to snap. Crix 9 found himself holding his breath, an unnecessary action for his species, but one that reflected his complete absorption in the unfolding drama. Apology noted, Maya said after a long moment. Not accepted. Dr. Patel glanced at her granddaughter. Maya. No, grandmother, Maya said firmly. Words aren't enough, and not this time. Elena Vasquez stood and produced a small holographic projector from her pocket. For the record, she said, activating the device. We are acting in accordance with Council Law 47, subsection 12, which permits proportional response in defense of family members. The holographic display showed the relevant legal text, floating in the air for all to see. Crix 9 automatically recorded and verified it against his internal database. The human was correct. The law existed and applied to this situation. This is your definition of proportional? One of the other Gordon officers demanded, finding his voice at last. Oh, we haven't responded yet, Tom said, speaking for the first time since the confrontation began. His voice was light, almost cheerful, but carried an underlying edge that sent a strange chill through Crix 9's central nervous system. Maya stepped closer to Vorth, who remained kneeling, partially paralyzed by Dr. Patel's precise strike. Remember, Maya, Tom called after her. No showing off. Standard protocol only. Crix 9 didn't understand the significance of those words, but he noted the way Vorth's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of something new appearing in them. Something that looked remarkably like fear. Don't worry, Maya said, her voice so soft that Crix 9 had to enhance the audio to capture it. This won't take long. What happened next occurred so quickly that even Crix 9's advanced recording system struggled to capture it clearly. Maya's movement was a fluid blur, her hands striking 3 precise points on Vorth's skull, one at the temple, one at the base of the skull, and one directly between the eyes, with a speed that seemed impossible for human reflexes. There was a wet, decisive sound. Then Vorth collapsed. He didn't fall like a stunned being. He crumpled like a structure whose central support had been removed. His massive body suddenly nothing more than dead weight hitting the polished floor of the plaza with a thunderous impact. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the continued gentle splashing of the biokinetic fountain. Chaos erupted a moment later. The watching crowd scattered in all directions, some emitting alarm pheromones or vocalizations specific to their species. Several Meridian merchants ascended rapidly toward the dome's upper levels, their transparent bodies flashing warning colors. A group of Talaxian diplomats literally froze in place, their defense mechanisms turning them temporarily to stone-like statues. The remaining Gordon officers raised their weapons, but seemed unsure where to point them, their training evidently not having prepared them for this scenario. Crix 9 remained rooted to his spot, all 3 of his brains struggling to process what he had just witnessed. The young human female had killed a Gordon elite guard with her bare hands. Not just killed, executed with a precision that spoke of extensive training and experience. His neural recorder continued to function automatically, capturing every detail of the aftermath while his conscious mind reeled. The humans, meanwhile, calmly returned to their table and resumed eating. The protein paste is getting cold, Tom remarked, as if commenting on the weather rather than sitting meters away from the corpse of a council peace officer. It's not very good even when it's warm, Elena Vasquez replied, taking a measured bite. Dr. Patel sighed and rejoined them, patting her granddaughter's hand as she sat down. You didn't need to do that, dear. A simple nerve block would have sufficed. Maya shrugged. wincing slightly as she touched her bruised cheek. "He didn't just assault me, grandmother. He assaulted all of us. Our dignity, our standing. The message needed to be clear." "It certainly was that," Tom said, his eyes scanning the plaza as the remaining civilians continued their panicked exodus. Crix 9 finally managed to override his shock and approach the human table, his recording devices still active. "What? What have you done?" he demanded, his normal detachment completely abandoned. The four humans looked up at him with mild interest, as if just noticing his presence. "Vaxian observer, correct?" Elena Vasquez asked, her tone professional. "You've been monitoring us for the past 43 minutes. Crix 9 felt a jolt of surprise. They had noticed him? Yes. "I am Crix 9, Xenoanthropological Documentation Specialist, and you have just killed a council peace officer in full view of hundreds of witnesses." "Correction," Elena said calmly. "We neutralized an immediate threat in accordance with Council Law 47 after being physically assaulted and threatened with a lethal weapon. But... Crix 9's vocal apparatus struggled to form coherent sounds as his three brains continued to process the implications. "You're humans. You're not supposed to be capable of defending ourselves," Dr. Patel suggested, her tone gentle, as if speaking to a confused child. "I'm afraid you've been misinformed about our capabilities. Observer Crix 9. "This is going in my report," Crix 9 said, trying to regain his professional demeanor. "The council will hear of this incident in detail." "We're counting on it," Tom said, that same cheerful edge in his voice. As Crix 9 backed away, he noticed that Maya was watching him with those alert eyes, studying him just as she had studied Vorth before ending his life. The look sent another chill through his system, a sensation he had never experienced before in his 67 cycles. It felt remarkably like what the translated human text referred to as fear. Captain Elena Vasquez's communicator chimed, breaking the tense moment. She activated it with a casual gesture. "Vasquez here." "A captain," came a voice that Crix 9 systems identified as human despite the slight distortion of the communication channel. "Station Command is reporting a disturbance in Central Plaza. Are you nearby?" "Affirmative, Commander," Vasquez replied. "We had an unfortunate incident with Sergeant Vorth of the Gordon security contingent. He physically assaulted Maya and threatened us with his force pike. The situation has been resolved." A pause. "Resolved how, Captain?" "Terminally, sir. Maya applied Standard Protocol 3. Another longer pause. "I see. Witnesses?" "Approximately 200 across various species. Full plaza security recording will have captured the incident from multiple angles." "Understood. Stand by for station security. I'll handle the diplomatic channels. Vasquez out." The communication ended, and Captain Vasquez returned to her meal as if nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. The remaining Gordon officers had backed away to a safe distance and appeared to be receiving new orders through their neural implants. They kept their weapons lowered but maintained a wary perimeter around the human table and their fallen commander. Dr. Patel dabbed at her mouth with a napkin and glanced at her chronometer. "Station security should be here in approximately 3 minutes. We should finish our meal before they arrive. The questioning always takes longer than it should." The three others nodded in agreement and continued eating with methodical efficiency. Crix 9 retreated further, his recording devices still active but his analytical functions now working at maximum capacity. Everything he thought he knew about humans was being systematically dismantled before his sensory apparatus. They were supposed to be the weakest, most technologically backward species ever granted provisional council membership. Their bodies lacked natural armor, venom, enhanced strength, or significant regenerative capabilities. Their technology was considered primitive, their weapons crude. They had been admitted to the council primarily as a curiosity and out of a perhaps misguided sense of inclusivity, or so he had been told. Yet he had just witnessed an elderly human female incapacitate a Gordon elite guard with a single touch, and her young granddaughter kill the same guard with 3 precise strikes, using nothing but knowledge of xenobiological vulnerabilities and terrifying speed. And now they sat eating as if nothing had happened, while casually acknowledging that this Protocol 3 was a standard response, implying it was something they were all trained in. Crix 9's third brain lobe, responsible for pattern recognition and predictive analysis, began to piece together a disturbing new hypothesis about humanity's true nature and capabilities. Station security arrived precisely when Dr. Patel had predicted. A mixed team of Vortian and Meridian officers led by a stern-looking Quill commander. They quickly established a perimeter around the scene and began scanning the area with various sensor devices. The Quill commander approached the human table, his feather appendages held rigid in the formal posture of his species. "Captain Vasquez, I presume?" Vasquez stood and offered what Crix 9 recognized as a human military salute. "Commander Zilpor, thank you for your prompt response. Would you care to explain why there is a dead Gordon elite guard on my plaza floor?" the commander asked, his translator rendering his whistling speech into standard Galactic with a slight musical lilt. "Of course," Vasquez replied, activating her holographic projector again. At approximately 14:37 station time, Sergeant Vorth approached our table and began making derogatory remarks about humans. When Maya Singh suggested he direct his energy elsewhere, he physically assaulted her. She gestured to Maya's bruised face. When Dr. Patel attempted to de-escalate the situation, Sergeant Vorth drew his force pike and threatened lethal force. We responded in accordance with Council Law 47, subsection 12. The Quill commander's feathers rippled slightly, indicating concern or skepticism. "You expect me to believe that this young female," he gestured toward Maya, "was capable of terminating a Gordon elite guard barehanded? I don't expect you to believe anything without evidence, Commander," Vasquez said smoothly. "The plaza security recordings will confirm our account. Additionally, there were numerous witnesses." She gestured toward Crix 9. "Including this Vaxian observer who recorded the entire incident." All eyes turned to Crix 9, who suddenly found himself the center of unwanted attention. "Is this true, observer?" the Quill commander asked. "Did you witness and record this incident?" Crix 9's vocal apparatus seemed to stick momentarily before he managed to respond. Yes. I recorded everything. The human female Maya Singh did indeed terminate the Gordon officer after he assaulted her and threatened the elder human with his weapon." The Quill commander's feathers shifted to a pattern that indicated deep thought. "I will need a copy of your recording for the official investigation." "Of course," Crix 9 said, transmitting the data through the station's secure network. "It is most illuminating." The commander reviewed the footage on his personal device, his feathers changing color and pattern rapidly as he watched. When he looked up, his demeanor had subtly changed. "I see. This is, consistent with your account, Captain Vasquez." "As I said it would be," Vasquez replied calmly. "The Gordon contingent will demand blood price," the commander warned, his voice lower. "This will create a diplomatic incident." The Gordon contingent initiated physical violence against a council citizen and threatened lethal force. Vasquez countered. "Under Section 47, our response was both legal and proportional. If they wish to pursue this matter, we are prepared to present our case to the full council." The Quill commander's feathers flattened slightly. a sign of acquiescence in his species. Very well, I will file this as a justified defense action. However, I would suggest you and your companions return to the human sector until this matter cools down. The Gordons are not known for their rational acceptance of defeat. Understood, Commander. We were just finishing our meal. As the security team began the process of removing Vorth's body and collecting evidence, the Gordon officers who had accompanied him finally withdrew, their postures radiating a combination of fury and newly acquired caution. Crix-9 watched it all unfold, his recording devices capturing every detail while his analytical functions continued to reassess everything he thought he knew about humans. There was something here, something fundamental that had been missed in all the official reports and analyses of Earth and its inhabitants. Tom stood and stretched casually, his eyes continually scanning their surroundings despite his relaxed demeanor. We should probably head back to the compound. I imagine Ambassador Williams will want a full briefing before the Gordon diplomatic team starts making noise. Dr. Patel nodded, rising with the fluid grace that had so surprised Crix-9 earlier. Maya, dear, you should have that cheek looked at when we return. Gordon epidermal secretions can sometimes cause secondary inflammation in human tissue. Maya touched her bruised face and nodded. I'll stop by medical, though I think this will make an interesting scar. My first from an actual alien encounter rather than training. The 4 humans gathered their belongings and prepared to leave, seemingly unbothered by the chaos they had created in the central plaza. As they turned to go, Dr. Patel paused and looked directly at Crix-9. Observer, she said, her voice carrying easily across the distance between them. You seem troubled by what you've witnessed today. Crix-9 found himself moving closer, drawn by something in her tone, a genuine interest that he rarely encountered in interspecies interactions. I do not understand, he admitted, abandoning all pretense of detached observation. Everything in our records indicates that humans are physically inferior, technologically primitive, and martially inexperienced compared to most council species. Yet you and your granddaughter... Dr. Patel smiled, the expression crinkling the corners of her eyes. Records can be misleading, especially when they contain only what others want them to contain, or what others believe to be true. Are you saying humans have deliberately misrepresented their capabilities to the Council? Crix-9 asked, his recording devices capturing every word of this remarkable conversation. Not deliberately misrepresented, Captain Vasquez interjected. Simply allowed certain assumptions to go unchallenged. There's a difference. But why? Crix-9 pressed. If humans possess such knowledge of xenobiological vulnerabilities and combat techniques, why present yourselves as harmless? Tom suggested, that perpetual half-smile playing on his lips. It's generally advantageous to be underestimated. Observer Crix-9, especially for a species new to a complex political environment like the Galactic Council. Maya, who had been silent during this exchange, finally spoke. We're not warriors by preference, observer, but we are survivors. There's a difference there too. With that enigmatic statement, the 4 humans departed, walking unhurriedly toward the transit hub that would return them to the human sector of Nexus Station. The crowd parted before them, species of all descriptions giving them a wide berth, newfound wariness evident in their movements. Crix-9 stood motionless for several minutes after they had gone, his 3 brains working furiously to integrate this new information into his understanding of humanity. Finally, he reactivated his dictation function. Supplemental report on human behavioral patterns, he began, his voice sounding strange even to his own auditory receptors. It appears that 47 cycles of xenoanthropological documentation regarding humanity must be substantially revised. Previous assessments of human physical capabilities, martial knowledge, and strategic thinking have been grossly inaccurate. He paused, watching as cleaning drones moved in to remove the last traces of Gordon biological material from the plaza floor. Humans appear to maintain a deliberate facade of harmlessness while possessing both the knowledge and willingness to execute lethal force when provoked. Their apparent physical frailty masks a sophisticated understanding of xenobiological vulnerabilities that renders conventional physical advantages moot. Their familial protective instincts trigger immediate and decisive responses to perceived threats. Another pause as he organized his thoughts. Most concerning is the revelation that this knowledge appears to be widespread among them, not limited to specialized military units. An elderly medical professional and a young civilian displayed combat techniques that would challenge our most elite security forces. The casual reference to standard protocols suggests systematic training across their population. Crix 9 began moving toward his own quarters, his normal methodical pace now somewhat hurried. Recommendation: immediate reassessment of humanity's provisional status within the Council. While they have demonstrated no aggressive expansionist tendencies, their capacity for self-defense has been severely underestimated. They are not, as previously categorized, harmless curiosities or primitive newcomers. They are something else entirely. As he entered the transport tube that would carry him to the observer quarters, Crix 9 added one final note to his report. A personal observation: humans appear to be genuinely peaceful and cooperative beings until their families, companions, or territories are threatened. At that point, they transform into something terrifyingly efficient and utterly remorseless. This duality may be their most alien characteristic of all. The transport doors closed, and Crix 9 felt an unfamiliar sensation spreading through his system, a new respect, tinged with caution, for the pink, squishy creatures who had just upended his understanding of galactic power dynamics. In the central plaza, life gradually returned to normal. The biokinetic fountain continued its hypnotic patterns. The crystal vendors resumed their sales pitches. Diplomats and merchants once again filled the spaces with conversation and negotiation. But something had changed. Something fundamental in the station's complex social ecosystem had shifted. In corners and alcoves, in private communications and whispered exchanges, the story spread. A human girl had killed a Gordon elite guard in 3 seconds with her bare hands. Her elderly grandmother had disabled him with a single touch. And they had done it legally, calmly, and without hesitation. By station nightfall, there wasn't a being on Nexus who hadn't heard some version of the story. By the following rotation, it had reached the nearest Council outposts. Within a week, it would be known throughout Council space. Humanity, it seemed, had just introduced itself properly to the galaxy. In his quarters, Crix 9 reviewed his recordings again and again, studying every detail of the encounter. His third brain, the one dedicated to pattern recognition and predictive analysis, kept returning to one particular moment. Dr. Patel's explanation of pressure points. Pressure is simply the application of force to a specific area to achieve a disproportionate result. It struck him suddenly that this wasn't just a description of a combat technique. It was, perhaps, the perfect metaphor for humanity's approach to galactic politics. Small, precisely applied force, at exactly the right place and time, to achieve results far beyond their apparent capabilities. Fascinating, he murmured, using the human term unconsciously. Truly fascinating. He activated his communication system, connecting to the central Vaxian archive on his homeworld. This report couldn't wait for standard transmission protocols. The High Archivist needed to understand what he had witnessed today, what it meant for the Council, for interspecies relations, and for the balance of power in the galaxy. Because one thing was now abundantly clear to Crix-9: humanity had been underestimated for the last time. As he prepared his comprehensive report, he couldn't help but wonder how many other species would learn this lesson the hard way. As Sergeant Vorth had, how many would make the fatal error of seeing humans as weak, primitive, or harmless? And how many would survive the experience? In the human sector of Nexus Station, 4 individuals sat in a comfortable common room, discussing the day's events with their colleagues. Their conversation was relaxed, interspersed with laughter and the occasional serious observation. To any observer, they might have appeared to be nothing more than friends unwinding after an eventful day. No one would have guessed that they had just fundamentally altered humanity's position in galactic society with a single, precisely applied demonstration of force. Pressure applied to exactly the right point to achieve a disproportionate result. Just as they had planned all along,